Welcome to all of you, whether you're joining us live or you're viewing this later as a recording. We are so happy to have you with us. My name is Naomi Hoffer. I'm the program manager for the Sheri Sobrato Brisson Brain Cancer Survivorship Program. And with us also here as part of our team is Alexa Greenstein, who is our survivorship nurse practitioner. She's in the background, as well as Mary Destree, who is our Marin Program Liaison Manager. So you may be hearing from both Alexa and Mary in the chat box or in the Q&A. So it's really my pleasure to be with you here. These Living Well After Brain Cancer Treatment webinars are part of our growing program, our neuro-oncology survivorship program, which is made possible by a generous grant from Sheri Sobrato Brisson. So we have these monthly webinars as well as integrative approaches classes. We have peer support, we have a Thriver group, we have a monthly support group, and many more developing resources to support you living out full and happy, healthy life. So thank you for being with us. So I'm delighted to be here with you today to discuss a really important topic that affects the lives of many, and that is sleep. And there's even a term now for it, and that's COVID-somnia or coronasomnia, so, because it's so invasive right now in our population. So today we are going to first learn about the importance of sleep and the many ways a restful or disruptive sleep can affect our lives. And then we'll learn some helpful strategies to improve our nighttime sleep and some stress management techniques. And after we hear from our featured expert on the topic, we will have the fortune of hearing from three wonderful people who will offer a more personal perspective on their experience with sleep and what has worked well for them. And we invite you to submit your questions in the Q&A box, as I had mentioned earlier, and hopefully we'll have time to get through most of those. But we can continue the discussion in our after the show unrecorded segments, where we invite you to turn your video on and we can have a dialogue together and perhaps even hear from you what your best practices are. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker for today's webinar. Dr. Neha Goyal is a psychologist at the UCSF Helen Diller Family Comprehensive Cancer Center within the Psycho-Oncology Department. She earned her PhD from Ohio State University and completed additional training at the VA Palo Alto and Wake Forest School of Medicine in North Carolina, where she is originally from. She uses cognitive behavioral and mindfulness-based approaches to help patients and their families cope with the emotional and physical challenges of a cancer diagnosis, including sleep problems. She finds it really rewarding when a patient has improved sleep as a result of their work together, since sleep plays a big role in quality of life. So I am delighted now to turn it over to Dr. Goyal, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here to talk with you about how to get a better night's sleep. And so I want to thank, for getting the invitation for being here to be able to present all of this with you. So as Naomi mentioned, my name is Neha. I'm a psychologist in the Psycho-Oncology Department at UCSF Cancer Center, and sleep is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think that there are very, proactive things that we can all be doing in order to improve our sleep. So I'd first like to also thank my colleague, Dr. Jamie Cohen, who is also a psychologist in psycho-oncology, for generously sharing her slides with me so I didn't have to reinvent the wheel here. Okay. So the things that we're going to be talking about. So first, I'm really going to talk about the importance of sleep, why we need it, what we get from it, and then talk about what is insomnia or different kinds of sleep issues that people may have, and specifically talk about how cancer and cancer treatments might affect insomnia and our sleep. Then I'm going to spend most of the session talking about strategies for improving sleep. So we're going to talk about strategies both from sort of a physical or physiological aspect, from what we call a behavioral aspect, and then a psychological aspect. And then I hope to end with talking about some relaxation strategies that can be helpful with sleep, although I think many of our panelists are going to be talking from their personal experience about strategies that they use that help them sleep as well. So why is sleep important? So this is probably something that you all absolutely know from your personal experience. But there's a lot of data and research into the importance of sleep, and there's a lot of unknowns about sleep as well. But what we do know is that, not surprisingly, right, that sleep plays an important role both in our physical and our mental health. So we all know that when we haven't had good sleep, we might be a little bit more moody the next day. We might feel a little bit more stressed. We might, not be able to do as many activities as we would like. We might not be as sharp that day, right? We may have some troubles with focusing or attention when we haven't slept well. We, might be more fatigued on those days. And then there's also data to show that when we don't get good sleep, it can impact our immune functioning and even our experience of pain. So this is just, a short list of some of the ways in which sleep plays a role in our life. And for that reason, sleep is really an important place where we can proactively do things to improve our quality of life. And we're going to talk about, while many of us might feel helpless around our sleep, right? When we can't sleep, I think many patients will come to me and say, it's something that's not in my control, right? This is something that I can't seem to get good sleep. And so when we finally start talking about specific strategies that they can be using, we find that many people can improve their sleep, even if it doesn't become perfect, let's say. So we can have different kinds of sleep issues. So the most common sleep issue that people can deal with are insomnia, which is either the inability to fall asleep, so having a hard time, getting to sleep, an inability to stay asleep, or when you wake up too early, right? Maybe you can fall asleep, maybe you can stay, asleep for the night, but then you're waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. and then can't go back to sleep. And so insomnia can look different for different people, and some people can have one of these, some people can have all three when they're having difficulty sleeping. Sleep apnea is another sleep disorder or sleep issue that some people may deal with. So this is a breathing disorder in which, people stop breathing for greater than 10 seconds during their sleep. So this is often, people may snore. You may notice, your partner might notice that you seem to be, stopping your breathing and then gasping for air. And there's a lot of negative impacts of sleep apnea. So this is an important thing to get diagnosed by a sleep specialist so that you can then get that treated with either the use of a CPAP or this machine that can help with sleep apnea or otherwise. And other types of sleep issues can be hypersomnia. So this is the opposite of insomnia, which is the inability to stay awake during the day. So someone who maybe just is having a really hard time kind of getting through the day without falling asleep during even activities that normally people may not fall asleep during. And then there's parasomnia, which is, sort of the clinical term, I guess, for things like sleepwalking. So acting in unusual ways while falling asleep, sleeping, or waking from sleep. I'm honestly today going to be mostly focusing on insomnia and for those who sort of have trouble with sleeping and strategies. But if you're concerned that you have, any of the other issues, it's important maybe to talk to your primary care about those issues so that you can get tested and potentially get referred to a sleep specialist if needed. And so, sleep issues are rampant, in the population. And in particular, as Naomi mentioned, this year has particularly been challenging when it comes to sleep. And so we know that there are lots of different things that can impact our sleep. But in particular, for those that are, dealing with cancer, have gone through cancer treatments, we know that many report sleep difficulties. It's a very common experience. So I share that to say you're not alone if you're here because you're having some sleep difficulties. In a recent paper that was actually published in 2020, the authors found that about 50% of patients with malignant brain tumors reported sleep difficulties. And that this was not just an issue that the patients themselves were dealing with, but also the caregivers. And in fact, actually 55% of their sample reported that, of the caregivers that they were having poor sleep. So in fact, many of the strategies that I'm talking about today are actually going to be applicable not only to the patient, so those who are dealing with the cancer, but also your caregivers and your family members. And so hence why this is a topic I think that we're covering today in terms of the prevalence of this particular issue that people are dealing with. So there are three different types of factors that we know contribute to what kind of sleep somebody has. So there are what we call the physiological factors. So these are the physical aspects that may contribute to sleep difficulties. And I'm going to start here. We'll talk about the behavioral and psychological aspects as well, but we're going to break it down into these three, and I'm going to start with the physiological aspects. So when it comes to cancer, we know that there are many specific cancer-related factors that can impact sleep. So from things like pain, right? We know when you're having more pain, obviously it's harder to sleep. If there's any issues with thyroid functioning, again, that's something that you might want to make sure you're getting checked by your primary care, your oncologist. If you're having GI problems, bladder problems, shortness of breath, right? So any number of side effects that one might be either having from treatment or, might be persisting after you have completed treatment can absolutely impact our sleep. And so, it's not surprising if you're having, trouble eating, or if you're having hot flashes as a result of whether the cancer or the treatment, that you might be having trouble sleeping. We also know that in addition to factors that might be specifically related to the cancer, that the treatments that you might take, whether it's during cancer or after cancer, that can impact your sleep as well. So one common agent that many of our patients take is steroids, right? And steroids are notorious for making our sleep go out of whack. And so if you're taking steroids for any reason, or on any type of even antidepressant or an anticonvulsant, these can absolutely impact your sleep and are important to consider as part of the whole picture of what factors might be impacting your sleep. And so how do we address these issues, these physiological issues? So the first step is to make sure you're talking to your medical team, right? If you're really struggling with sleep difficulties, it's important to maybe review your medication list with your doctors to see if any of them in particular are known for impacting sleep and energy. Sometimes, your physician or your doctor, your medical team might be willing to make a change, change it to a different medication so that to one that has less impact on sleep. And so that's important to have that communication with them, especially if you're having sleep difficulties. And if you're having side effects or persistent side effects, so even if you've completed treatment but continue to, let's say, have really bad fatigue or continue to have pain, again, it's really important to be talking to your medical team about optimizing these side effects so that they can continue, so that there can be improvements and hopefully then have secondary improvements on your sleep. So a question that we often get about sleep is, the role of sleep aids or sleep agents in terms of helping us sleep. So for many, you might be prescribed a medication that helps with not only sleep, but can help with other symptoms. So there are certain medications, let's say if you're having issues with appetite, that you can be prescribed that both help with appetite, but also can help with sleep. And so, if it's possible and you're on any certain medications, you might ask your doctors, is there a medication that I can be taking that will target, multiple issues that I might be having? One, so we can minimize the amount of meds that you're taking, because I know already, many patients will tell me I'm on such a laundry list of medications, it's hard to think about adding one more. So if there's a way to, maybe combine taking one medication so that it has an effect on multiple things, then I think that that's one way or one thing that you might be able to do in terms of talking with your doctor. Some prescribed medications for sleep. So for example, Ativan, technically is only meant to be used on a short-term basis. So this is a type of medication that, absolutely can help us sleep because it sort of decreases our anxiety, maybe has some beneficial effects on some of our side effects. But it's really meant to be something that is not used in the long term. And that is because it can be addictive. And so while it's important to use these medications and you are prescribed these medications by your physician, and there's nothing wrong with taking these medications, it is important to think about, am I using this on a long-term basis, or is this meant to help me get through a certain period of my life? So let's say to get through treatment. And so you really want to be talking with your physicians or your doctors or your medical team about, should I be taking Ativan, let's say nightly for sleep, or is there a different medication that I might be taking that is better for long-term use? And you might then talk with your doctors about the pros and cons of any particular medication that you might be taking. It is very possible to make behavioral changes to your sleep such that you might not even need any medications anymore. And I think that is our ideal kind of goal. But of course, some people need medication to sleep, and I think that's perfectly fine as long as we're being mindful of our use and how much we're using these medications and how it affects us the next day. And I think that, one of the things that I'm going to be specifically talking about is something we call cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So this is a type of psychological therapy that uses cognitive and behavioral strategies for improving sleep. So we're not going to be able to talk about all of the strategies in our one session today, but I'm going to give you some resources at the end that include a list of books and a list of sort of online websites that help you walk through some of the strategies that are talked about in CBTI. And so many people who have actually gone through CBTI treatment have found that they actually have been able to get off of their sleep medications just by making behavioral and psychological changes. So let's talk about those changes. So in terms of the behavioral changes, so these are actions or behaviors or things that we can be doing ourselves to improve our sleep. So what are some of those? Well, before we talk about those, we should talk about what are some of the factors that actually impact our sleep. So we've talked about the physiological factors. So we also know that behavioral factors can impact our sleep. So if you've had any disruption in your day-to-day routine, like a pandemic, we know that that is going to potentially be a precipitant of sleep problems, right? Once your schedule gets off of routine, that this can slide us into a place of having really, challenges with our sleep that become a little bit difficult for us to get out of. So if there's changes in your work, if there's changes in, when you're exercising, if there's, again, a pandemic happening, or if you're going through treatment, that these are all potential changes in our routine or structure that can impact our sleep. Being in the hospital or being away from our homes can also impact our sleep. For many people, the hospital is, not a pleasant place to get sleep with all the beeping machines and people coming in and out. So we find that some people who have recently been hospitalized continue to actually have sleep problems afterwards because their routine, again, has been changed. And so it's important to implement some of the behavioral strategies we're talking about soon after there has been a disruption in your routine so that we can help prevent sleep problems from persisting. We also know that spending more time in bed, maybe because you're feeling fatigued, maybe because you're having other symptoms, can actually, in the long term, impact our sleep as well. And so we'll talk about, what you might be able to do when these behavioral factors have come into play. So one of the most important concepts with sleep is a concept called sleep efficiency. And so what is this concept? Sleep efficiency is the amount of time that we are sleeping divided by the amount of time we are spending in bed. okay? So if I spend 10 hours in bed and sleep for 8 of those hours, my sleep efficiency is 80%. I'm sleeping 8 of the 10 hours that I am in bed. For those who are good sleepers, the definition of a good sleeper is someone who is about 90% sleep efficiency or higher. So this person is spending 90% of their time or more sleeping when they are in their bed. And so how do we optimize sleep efficiency? So one of the ways to do this is to only stay in bed for as long as you are able to sleep. So I am really guilty of not doing this. I, unfortunately, even though I teach all of these strategies, I'm quick to kind of grab my cell phone when I wake up in the morning and spend an extra, 15 to 30 minutes in bed, checking my email before I get up in the morning. So I am reducing my sleep efficiency by spending time in bed where I'm actually not sleeping. And so one of the ways that we can improve our sleep is by trying to, get out of bed when we are not sleeping. I know that, we'll talk about how there might be challenges to this, especially when you're not feeling well. But for those who are able to, being able to kind of get out of bed when they're not sleeping helps us to optimize the sleep efficiency. It's also important to make sure that we are associating the place that we sleep, so our bed, with a place of rest and sleep, okay? And the way that we do that, again, is by optimizing the time that we're spending in bed sleeping and not doing other activities. So one of the suggestions from sleep experts about sleep is to only reserve the bed, and if you're able to, the bedroom, for sleep, sex, and being sick. So we call it the 3 S's, that only it's during those times that you should be laying in bed. We also encourage people to only go to bed when they feel tired. Only go to bed when they feel sleepy. And there's a difference between being tired and being sleepy. So tired, is that, you are just feeling a little bit worn down, not having as much energy. But sleepy is sort of when your eyes are drooping, right? And you're just like having a hard time staying awake. And so we only want to go to bed when we are feeling sleepy, not just tired. One of the, challenging aspects of some of the behavioral strategies we'll talk about is that if you're having trouble falling asleep, if it feels like it's been about 15 to 20 minutes and you haven't been able to fall asleep, we recommend that you actually get out of bed if this is possible. And the reason, again, for this is because we want to minimize the association of bed with activities that are not sleep. So when it's taking us a while to fall asleep, our mind gets really confused. Is this a place where I rest? Or is this a place where, I'm tossing and turning, I am reading, I am on my phone, right? And so your body gets so confused and your mind gets so confused if you stay in bed and you're not sleeping. And so sleep experts recommend that if you haven't been able to fall asleep after what feels like 15 to 20 minutes, and I say feels like because, again, one of the strategies we'll talk about is to try to not to watch the clock, is to get out of bed and go do something else that is relaxing. So that can be something like, reading a boring book. It can be something like doing a puzzle. One of my colleagues' patients will fold the laundry sometimes in the middle of the night if she can't sleep. So doing a sort of boring activity until you feel sleepy again. And then when you get sleepy, to get back into bed and try to fall asleep. And then once you are awake in the morning, again, getting out of bed sort of is as quickly as possible. I know for some, maybe you have achy joints and it takes a little while for your body to warm up, and that's okay. But the moment that you're able to get out of bed, so unlike myself and being on the phone, get out of bed. And that, again, is all to optimize the bed as a place for rest and relaxation and sleep. So we often are asked, what is the number one thing, if I had to change one thing about my sleep that would improve your sleep, what would that be? And the answer is to wake up at the same time every day. And this is because our body and our mind crave routine. We work on what is called a circadian rhythm, which is a fancy sort of biological term for our body, our internal body clock. And so our mind and our body like things being regimented. They like routine. And so when you wake up at the same time every day, it sets the stage for having a routine throughout the day. We can't control when we go to sleep and when we fall asleep, but we can control when our alarm clock goes off and when we get out of bed. And so this is one place where if you were to make one change, this would be the change that I would recommend, to try to wake up at the same time every day, on the weekdays, on the weekend, whatever day of the week it is, to try to wake up at the same time every day. And the reason that we also say this is because if you're waking up at different times every day, you're essentially jet lagging yourself. So it's as if you've traveled to New York and back. If you, let's say, wake up 3 hours later today than you did yesterday. And so essentially you're jet lagging yourself every day if you don't wake up around the same time. So some additional behavioral strategies are things that we call sleep hygiene. So these are healthy sleep habits that we can all be doing in order to get healthy and good sleep. So it's curious that as we become adults, we start to lose the routines that we used to do when we were children to help us sleep. For those of you who have children or have, let's say, nieces or nephews, or even have seen this on TV, that when we are putting children to sleep, we often create a really nice nighttime routine. Maybe it includes reading a story, maybe it includes taking a bath, brushing your teeth, changing into pajamas, and having some wind down time, right? And so one of the things that, unfortunately, as we get older, we lose this. We stop creating a sort of buffer time between our day and sleep, and just try to immediately go from, our daily activities into trying to go to sleep. And so, of course, our mind is very active and it's having a hard time going to sleep because we haven't given this buffer space for us to kind of calm down and prepare ourselves and our mind for going to sleep. So similar to what we recommend for children, this is important for adults as well. Maybe your routine looks a little bit different. Maybe you incorporate some, light stretches or a relaxation exercise, maybe reading a book, but having some type of a routine before you go to bed, we know can really, really help you get better sleep. We also want to be mindful of any substances that we might be taking that could impact our sleep. So not surprisingly, we want to avoid caffeine in the afternoons and the evenings. So I have found that if I have caffeine after 1 o'clock, it impacts my sleep. And so I'm very mindful of not having any type of caffeine after 1 o'clock, although I broke that rule yesterday and paid the consequences for that, and actually ironically had a hard time sleeping last night because of that. But caffeine later in the day can really impact our sleep. And we also want to be on the lookout for caffeine in unexpected places. So actually chocolate has caffeine. So if you're having, some chocolate right before you go to bed, and then you're having trouble sleeping, you might want to try taking out that chocolate or having the chocolate earlier in the day, and seeing how that might impact your sleep. We also want to avoid, cigarettes and minimize our alcohol intake. while alcohol might help us to fall asleep, it actually leads to more disrupted sleep and less restful sleep. And so, in the long term, alcohol intake to help sleep is really not a good solution. And also want to be mindful of our sugar intake. If you have a lot of sugar at close to bedtime, that this can really impact our ability to fall asleep. So similar to kids again, right? We often try not to give kids a lot of sugar before they go to bed. The same again applies to us as adults. We also want to be mindful of our hunger levels, right? It's important to not go to bed hungry because our stomach might be growling. It might be hard to get relaxed, but we also don't want the opposite, right? Don't consume a heavy or difficult to digest meal right before bedtime. You want there to be some time for that digestion to happen before you go to sleep. So this is a controversial one, but honestly, this varies from person to person. And there's no sort of hard and fast rules about napping, in particular when you are, going through cancer treatments, because of course we know that those can tire us out, can make us feel really fatigued, and naps are essential for being able to get through the day. But we do say if you are going to nap and you are able to try to have more of what we call the cat nap or the power nap, to aim to nap for less than 30 minutes, because we know that napping can interfere with our ability to sleep at night. So in some ways, if you are napping during the day, it's actually stealing away from the nighttime sleep that you might be trying to have later. And so if you're able to get through the day without napping, that is the most ideal of circumstances. If you need to nap in order to function or in order to get through the day, that is perfectly okay and makes sense. But we ask that, maybe you try to minimize the length of those naps, unless, of course, you're feeling acutely ill and really need that sleep. And again, these are only strategies for those who are having trouble sleeping. If you're taking naps and you're not having trouble sleeping at night, then, totally disregard any this, recommendation. But this is really for if you're having trouble sleeping at night. Some additional recommendations. We really want to, as I talked about, make a routine. It's really important to have a comfortable and good place for sleep, okay? So we want it to be dark, we want it to be quiet, we want it to be comfortable, and we want it to be free from distractions as much as possible. Of course, some of you likely live in the city. There's going to be noises on, outside your window, so it's not all preventable. But actually using eye masks or earplugs can actually be really, really helpful. If, let's say, you have a window that sort of light comes shining in through and you don't have control over that. But many people swear by the kind of blackout curtains if maybe light is getting in the way of your sleep. We also want you to be mindful of your use of electronics. Again, I don't follow this rule sometimes, but trying to minimize your exposure to the light and the artificial light that comes from, cell phones or tablets, is also in TVs. We actually would recommend in an ideal world that you actually don't have a TV in your bedroom, because again, these are things that can disrupt our sleep. Also, maybe having a glass of warm milk or taking a warm bath 1 to 2 hours before you go to sleep can help to facilitate sleep as well. So you don't want it too close to bedtime because maybe you'll overheat. But if you take it maybe 1 to 2 hours before, your body temperature will start to decline, and it's during that time that actually helps promote relaxation and sleep. And then if you are able to, engaging in some type of physical activity during the day, some exercise can help with sleep as well. Okay, so those are the behavioral factors. It's quite a lot, but remember, if you're going to change one thing, it is to try to wake up at the same time every day. And then, not surprisingly, our mind and psychological factors can impact our sleep. So the way that we think about sleep, our thoughts about sleep, can impact our ability to fall asleep, as well as our emotions. We know that if you're feeling more stressed, if you're more worried, if you're feeling anxious, if you're, just experienced a loss or have grief, that these are all emotions that obviously can impact our ability to sleep. So unfortunately, sleep is one of those things that the harder you try to do it, the harder it is to do, right? You can't just kind of force yourself to sleep. And in fact, when we try to do that, it actually makes it harder for us to sleep because it's making us anxious, right? We're not feeling relaxed. We're sort of like, when am I going to fall asleep? If you wake up in the middle of the night, oh my gosh, I've only got 2 hours left. I've only got, 1 hour left before I have to wake up. And so the more you think about sleep and the more that you're worried about sleep, unfortunately, the harder it is to fall asleep. So I always tell my patients, we want to try to think about how can we help you cultivate what I call a nonchalant attitude towards sleep, right? Yes, sleep is important. And at the same time, the more we worry about sleep, the harder it becomes to do. And so here are some common kind of thoughts or myths that people may hold about sleep. So one common thing I'll hear is I need 8 hours of sleep, right? There's this magic number of 8 hours. But the reality is everyone's sleep needs varies. 8 hours is the average amount of sleep, but some people need only 6 hours, others need 10 hours in order to get good sleep. So 8 isn't this sort of magic number that fits all. And so that's a common myth that we often hear patients talk about. Another thing that may come up is I will not be able to function tomorrow if I don't sleep. Yes, you might not be at 100%, and we talked about how sleep can impact our functioning, but it's still likely that you'll be able to manage even if you don't fall asleep tonight. Like I said, I did not get a good night's sleep last night, while I would definitely say I'm not at 100%, I'm definitely able today to be here to present with you. And so while it's not ideal, again, that helps me to feel less worried about my sleep. So when I was up in the middle of the night, I was really trying to focus on my nonchalant attitude and saying, this is fine, it's okay. If I don't get sleep today, I'll get it tomorrow. And so really kind of trying to lessen that worry about sleep. And then another kind of common thought that comes up for many people, especially understandably for those who are having sleep problems, is I'm never going to learn to sleep better. And we always want to be mindful of the words always and never in any thought that we have that comes up. But as we are talking about today, there are many things that you can be doing to help you sleep better. And it just might take some time to find it. And I'm so glad that we have some, patients here today to be able to talk about their experiences and how, it may have taken some time, but we're able to find some, ways that improve their sleep. And then, of course, just kind of generally thinking about our stress, it's important to manage our stress in order to sleep better, right? So while we may have stress specifically about sleep, stress about other things can also impact our sleep. And understandably, there is a lot of stress right now, right? There's the pandemic, there is dealing with whatever, kind of diagnosis you might be dealing with. There's stress of relationships. There's so many stressors out there. And so it's important for us to also make sure that we are managing our stress in different ways. But with the last bullet point we have here, right, stress is inevitable in our lives. Our goal is not to get rid of the stress or to eliminate it completely, because that's not realistic. Stress is part of being human. It's part of our lives. What we want to try to do is manage our stress, right? And find ways that we can handle the stress that is coming up in our lives. So this is a topic in and of itself. We could talk another 45 minutes about that. But here's a couple of things we know for fact that help people manage stress. So prioritizing self-care, right? So being able to, do activities that replenish us, that maybe give us a meaning. This could be doing a hobby. This could be, going for a walk. Anything that is self-care for you. And this varies from person to person, but it's important to make sure, and I tell people at least once a day, to do something that is for you and for your mental health. Exercising relaxation, so doing sort of relaxation strategies or mindfulness strategies can help us manage stress. This has, never been more true or kind of put into the forefront this year of connecting with our social support. Because many of us haven't been able to connect and have been more isolated, we've seen the impacts of, the negative impacts of that. And so it's important to still connect with our sources of support, even if, it's virtually or telephone or from a distance, to make sure we stay connected with our community and with our support. And then be strategic about kind of your worry time. And what I mean by that is, for some people, actually setting aside 20 to 30 minutes of their day for what they call worry time can be actually really helpful. So this is a time when you get to journal and just maybe write down all of the worries that you might be having. So you set aside this time, not too close to bedtime, maybe, sometime in the afternoon. You set aside 20 minutes, you write down all of your worries, and then you let it go. And so when a worry comes up at a different time, or if a worry comes up while you're, trying to fall asleep, you can tell yourself, I'll worry about that during my worry time. So you're not avoiding it completely because you're going to come back to it, but you're not allowing kind of worry to infiltrate throughout your day. So that's what we mean by being strategic about your worry time. So I'm going to end by talking about this 4-7-8 breathing. So this is a breathing strategy that is, one of many breathing strategies that can be helpful for falling asleep or going to sleep. So the 4-7-8 corresponds to an inhalation of 4 counts, holding for 7 counts, and then exhaling for 8 counts. So you would, count in, so you would inhale through your nose, count to 4, you would hold your breath for 7, and then you exhale for 8 with like a whoosh down, right? So like a very pronounced exhale. And so you can do this, for 3 more times, or you could continue that. But some people have really, swear by this being something that helps them fall asleep, because I think it gives them something to focus on right when you're counting, but it also relaxes the body. So something I think, if you're interested, should maybe think about trying. Another type of relaxation that can be helpful is something we call progressive muscle relaxation. We're not going to talk about that today, but if you're interested, it's something that you can look up as well. And then, as I mentioned, there are definitely some resources, and maybe Naomi will be able to share these. But here are some books that kind of, again, are based in this idea of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, as well as some online programs. So the VA has done a really good job of trying to educate people about insomnia. So they have some really great information on their website about this. So if you're interested, even though it's targeted towards veterans, the information in there is really helpful, as well as the other online programs that have been developed as well, that while they're not cancer specific, definitely have the strategies that we have talked about and are still absolutely applicable to those who may be dealing with cancer as well. So I'm going to stop there.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Goyal. That's just a wealth of great strategies and tips and things that we can all just start tonight, really. So I really appreciate that great information. Please remember to submit your questions using the Q&A function, and we will have some time at the end for answering your questions, as well as hopefully moving into a discussion with you in our face-to-face non-recorded segment in our After the Show. So I am going to now turn it to our panelists, our survivor panelists, and I'm going to invite Jenna Wilson on. If you could turn your video on, Jenna, and I will introduce you. And then we'll have Michael after that. So Jenna Wilson, I'll just let everybody know, Jenna Wilson was diagnosed over 17 years ago with oligodendroglioma and has been a massage therapist for 24 years and a holistic health coach. She's also a social worker who specializes in working with seniors with dementia. Jenna has been struggling with insomnia all her life, and she'll be sharing with us her own journey through it and some specific techniques that have been most helpful to her. Jenna, thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm going to just now turn it over to you to tell us your story and to tell us your strategies and tips. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, so one of the things that I do is I teach people meditation and techniques for relaxation and the basics of self-hypnosis, and especially for dealing with headaches and with insomnia. I had been dealing with insomnia for as long as I can remember, and so I don't anymore. And first of all, I wanted to say that I think part of the reason why I don't have troubles with it anymore is just knowing that I have these tools that help me fall asleep that I'm going to share with you. Just knowing that I have those helps me fall asleep, because I know that I can possibly not have troubles falling asleep. Well, first of all, number one is earplugs. I have to have earplugs. And then as Neha brought up warmth, I have a mattress heater, and that really helps me fall asleep, is just having that warmth. And the other thing I also help people with is learning about using creative imagery. So one of the creative imagery techniques that you can use when you're having stressful thoughts running through your head is imagine taking that stressful thought or thoughts and saying, now is not the time to be dealing with this. I can put it in this container. So imagining taking that stressful thought, putting it in a container, putting it on the shelf. Yeah. And then the techniques I wanted to talk about that really have helped me a lot have been, number one, I'm going to say ASMR, which stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And they're videos that you can find on YouTube that are, and look up ASMR for sleep, or just sleep. And it's the people make sounds that create this sensation of the sounds coming like from all around in your ears, and and it has to be in earplugs. It has to be balanced because they use special microphones that record the sound so that it feels like it's around your head. And it's like, for me, I turn it on and I'm asleep within, I don't know, it feels like seconds. And then also there's an app called Calm, and they have bedtime stories, and that also really helps. And that's, for me, I just put my phone aside and listen to that. It doesn't have to be balanced. Also, I use self-hypnosis, and just, that's one of the things I teach people, just like a basic self-hypnosis process that you can do. And that's something I can share after the show. And if you guys want to learn how to do that. And got my notes here. Oh yeah, and then another technique I have is it's called EFT, and some of you guys may have heard of it. It stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, or sometimes people just call it tapping. And I can also share more information about that afterwards. There's a website you can go to download the manual of how to do it. And I'm trying to see, am I forgetting anything? I think that's all I was going, yeah.
That's great. There was a couple of those techniques that you mentioned that I had never heard before. The EFT for sleep, and also the meridian, the ASMR. Is that what you said? Yeah, which I'm really curious, and the self-hypnosis, how that might work. And does a person have to be like trained in
No.
I mean, no, you can learn it pretty easily.
No, yeah, it's very, very simple.
Okay.
It's just a very simple process of bringing, again, visualizing, and saying something in your mind. You start at the top of, you visualize some stairs,
Mm,
and depending on where you're going, so you create a very safe, comfortable space, first of all, for yourself.
yeah.
And you start at the top of the steps and you say, okay, every step I go, every step I take, I go deeper and deeper into my subconscious mind.
Mm,
And I feel sleepier and sleepier. And you start with 10. My eyelids are feeling heavy.
mm.
9, I'm feeling sleepier. 8, I'm starting to slip into my subconscious mind, like that. And then
That's starting to work on me already.
exactly. And sometimes you don't even have to get to the place.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can have, like, I have my teachers with me down there, or people who I feel safe for me, or are healers, or you can imagine people there, or and wherever, it could be like near a pond or a lake or the ocean, or in someplace to feel safe and comfortable. Oh, and then
Wonderful.
what was I going to say about EFT? So when you learn how to do it, oh yeah, I was walking down the street and I met this woman randomly who is a psychotherapist, and she uses EFT with her patients, and she said it's more effective than anything else she's ever used. And she taught me this technique because I mentioned it's tapping, and it's a series of different acupressure points, actually. So for sleep, she taught me, you don't physically tap the points, but you imagine tapping the points, and you kind of like sense the tapping, and you repeat in your mind over and over, drifting, drifting, drifting.
Mm.
And again, you get to like the second one and you're asleep. And it sounds so simple, but I'm telling you, like, these things really work. And
Yeah.
again, just knowing you have them is, yeah, it's like, oh, it makes you feel relaxed, and you don't stress out about, oh my God, am I going to be able to sleep? And, like she mentioned.
Yeah, just like Dr. Goyal mentioned, like it doesn't work to try to go to sleep, but just so knowing that you have this that you can lean on to, that you kind of forget about it then.
Yeah, I don't have insomnia ever. It's crazy at all anymore. My whole life I had it. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I appreciate also you being willing to kind of teach us more after the show, and we can make it experiential with you. So thank you, Jenna. I appreciate that. Well, now I'm going to ask Will Pierce to come up, and Jenna, we'll see you after the show. Thank you.
Bye.
Will, if you could turn on your video now, I'm going to introduce Will.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Will, I'm going to introduce you here. Will is a 20-year survivor of an astrocytoma in his left frontal lobe. First diagnosed at 23 years with a non-operable tumor, he decided to keep living his life, finished law school, traveled, met his wife, moved to San Francisco, built a career, and started a family. And then in January 1st of 2018, he experienced a grand mal seizure, which fractured his shoulder and brought him in to get an MRI showing significant tumor growth, which led to surgery at UCSF. After many months in a difficult recovery process, he became depressed and anxious about the future. And after reaching what he calls rock bottom, he somehow found a deep strength and courage and made a decision to keep going. He sought solutions to help in many areas of his life, including sleep. And today, Will is very much involved, not only in his own health, recovery, and well-being, but also in helping us grow the UCSF Neuro-Oncology Survivorship Program and helping others through our peer support program, which we are very grateful for. Will, thank you so much for being here today. And so could you please tell us a bit about your sleep history and strategies that you've tried and what has been helpful for you?
Yes, I'd love to. And thank you so much, Naomi. This is great. And Neha and Jen as well. Thank you so much for opening this up. So I'm similar to Jen now, where I've actually had sleep problems my entire adult life since I was basically a teenager. And once I grew into my 30s, I was taking some kind of drug pretty much every night to sleep, and nothing crazy. Melatonin was one of them, Benadryl, and I think Zyrtec, one of the allergy medicines, would help me sleep at night, and alcohol too. But it got to a point where it was an entire decade of doing this, and it stopped helping. And I had such a hard time sleeping. So it was my whole life. And then as an adult, it didn't get any better. And, you know, I take melatonin and just stare at the ceiling, and it was kind of scary. So then bring on the grand mal seizure, that happens. And one of the fears I had with that, among other things with brain surgery I was going to have, was that I didn't want to get out of surgery and heal with a possible addiction to sleeping pills or sleeping something, because I needed to sort of heal my internal body first. So I started a kind of haphazard plan then, but I really fundamentally built that plan, as Naomi said, after I'd had surgery. So beforehand, I kind of started a plan just to cleanse my body, this stuff, because I was afraid that after surgery to recover would be hard if I had to deal with that as well. But after surgery, so surgery was March of 2018, and April and May were just kind of blurry months of recovering. But June was where, as Naomi said, I kind of hit rock bottom, and I had this very just depression, anxiety, everything under the sun, where I honestly thought I'd never get better. And it wasn't just sleep, it was everything. My whole life I thought was just falling apart. And that's when I really built like a 21-day program that has 2.5 steps to it, to be honest with you. And I used a version of that before my surgery, but this is where I really put it into place. And for this, I'll say 2 caveats here. The first is that I'm not a doctor or scientist, so some of this is just my personal actions, and, you know, take that with your own grain of salt, but think that if it helped me, it could also help you. And the second one is, like, to be honest with you, to really do it the way I did it and to heal it. And I am healed now. I don't take anything. I actually took Benadryl earlier this week because of my allergies, and I woke up not feeling well. So it's like my body can sleep now, and I'm happy about it. It's amazing. So the second step is just the discipline. Like, if you want to do this, I'd say build a 21-day program. And I use that number because that's often the amount of time it takes our body to readjust to something. And Neha said it well too, is we have to create the habit and the readjusting to the ability to sleep. So with that in mind, the 2.5 step program, I'll tell you now, I laugh because the half step is not necessary, but I think it is something that's really important if you want to really cleanse yourself of insomnia. And that half step is just giving up alcohol for the sort of training period. The primary reason is because it really messes with your REM sleep. So if you drink to go to sleep at night, you may fall asleep, but it's not going to be the 90% sleep. You're going to have very low REM. You're going to wake up the next day exhausted still. So that's something a lot of us use to sleep, but it's not helpful at all. So the half point, you don't have to do it, but I think it's beneficial. Take the alcohol out. And the other 2 points are literally warming up a cup of tea and meditation. So the meditation point, and this is where Jenna would know way more than I do, but my take is I needed to have a solid meditation to put me to sleep in the proper environment to do it. So for me, that was in my own bed, but I would put headphones on, let the rest of the world kind of quiet away. And different people respond to different types of meditation. Some like just quiet sounds, some like, you know, a number of things Jenna said. I like a little narrative. I like a story that kind of calms you, collects you, puts you down, and then you just fall asleep through it. So that's sort of step one, is find the right meditation program, create the right space for it. And for me, again, that was some headphones on because I have a family, just lying in bed, relaxing, and just make sure your spouse or whoever understands that you do need that as your personal space. So that's step one. And step two, I said, is a cup of tea. The easiest way to do this is chamomile. Chamomile is a very relaxing tea. So at night, you can pour your cup of chamomile, sit outside, sit inside, just calm yourself. Take your deep breaths, reflect on life a little bit in the positive ways, slowly drink your tea. And once you finish, get in bed. So the chamomile is one way to do it, and that's a very safe way. The way that I found really helpful for me is that there are, with marijuana, there's THC and there's CBD. The THC part gets you a little bit high. The CBD just kind of relaxes you and calms down. There are some really good THC CBD combo teas that are amazing at night. I forgot the name of one of them, but we can share it later. It has a very little bit of THC, so it's not meant to get you any kind of high, but it has a good CBD in it. And honestly, that is what helped me. And I rarely ever even use that now, but it was such a good way to sort of build the program in, have some of that, relax, lie down, do the long meditation, and just fall asleep. And it doesn't always work the first 5 to 7 days, but saying 21-day program, keep it in place, and it works. And it's not that complicated. If you look at it as that, let's create a simple program. Let's do this right. Let's find a relaxing way to lie down, to listen to our meditation, to calm, to have our cup of tea, and just relax through the evening. It works. And like I said, I'm not a calm person. I've always had a lot of anxiety and things like that. So for me to be able to find a method that I can actually sleep at night without needing anything is sort of amazing, because the big picture, Naomi, is that like, this is a war we're fighting here when we have brain tumors. And the best part is to get small battles put aside as much as possible. And this is a battle that I've been dealing with since I was like 14 years old, and it's gone, and it makes me feel phenomenal. So take those things into mind, because it's very helpful to be able to have rest and relaxation, because then you'll have more energy in the day. You'll be happier with life, and you'll be able to enjoy life, even though we live with a very detrimental illness. So, take that stuff with a grain of salt, try to build the discipline if you can, and, hopefully you can find something that works. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. That's really great information. And I think Mary has put a couple of the links in that you mentioned with the tea. And so appreciate it. Really, really great. Great strategies. So we also have another survivor who is joining us by phone. His name is Michael Dunbar, and I am going to allow him to speak, but I am going to first of all introduce him. Glad he's here today. Michael Dunbar is almost 20-year brain cancer survivor, diagnosed in 2001 with glioblastoma multiforme, or GBM. He was given an initial prognosis of 6 to 12 months. But since that time, Michael has taken control of his journey by incorporating many wellness and lifestyle changes into his life. 3 years ago, he experienced a bit of a setback when he had a small stroke linked to a post-surgical radiation therapy, affecting the left side of his body, and from which he is still recovering. Yet he continues to thrive in his survivorship and has recently joined our UCSF Neuro-Oncology Peer Support Program, as has Will, and he is one of our valued volunteers, offering support and hope to many others. He's also actively involved in many other nonprofit organizations. So I'm delighted to have Michael with us here today. And Mary or Alexa, if you could help me unmute Michael, and I will have him tell us verbally a little bit about his experiences. Michael, if you could talk a little bit about your sleep history and any strategies that you've tried and what has been helpful. Do we have Michael here? Okay, we might not be able to hear from Michael. He's having some computer issues, and we thought we could hear from him verbally. So while we're working this out, if any of you have questions, I'm going to now, I think I see one question here. Michael, can you speak yet?
I can speak. I just don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, now we can hear you. Okay, sorry, Dr. Goyal, we'll come
to
you. But yeah, Michael, we'll turn it over to you now to tell us what about your sleep history and what worked for you.
Thanks, Naomi. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea well before my cancer diagnosis. Got the CPAP, hated it, absolutely hated it. So did my wife, because the mask really bothered me. The sound of the machine and its motors and pumps really bothered her. So the first step towards staying in the same room was giving up the CPAP, and the second step for giving up after getting rid of the CPAP was, we have a 6-bedroom house. I moved to one of the downstairs bedrooms, which solved the CPAP noise problem. Just didn't really work well for our marriage. Anyway, so dumped the CPAP, tried all kinds of different devices for the snoring problem. None of it really worked. So I just found someone that said, yeah, make sure you sleep on your side. So I've started that with a iPhone app to track how much I'm sleeping, or how much I'm snoring at night. It tells me whether it was light snore, deep snore, or epic. It's an app called
Great.
sleep score.
Yeah.
So I use that pretty much every night just to check to see what it thought of my night's sleep. But the real truth is to find out how I feel. And I've had a pretty good correlation between the numbers from the app and how good I feel the next morning. So what I've added to my daily routine is a morning of about an hour of exercise. I'm lucky to have a friend who's got a daughter that's a physical therapist. So each night she develops a exercise plan for me to do the next day because of my recovery, helping my recovery from the stroke, but also I've got a shoulder injury. So she's got strengthening, balancing, and core exercises on there for me to do. So I do that every single day. Sometimes I add some of my own exercises in. And one of the, I think the best ingredients in there is a brisk neighborhood walk, just to kind of get my mind cleared with the fresh air and a little bit of, the cardio. It's not, my pulse rate gets up to 110 or 120 with that. And that, so I go about a mile. So I did a little bit more than a mile this morning. As a result, sitting here in the chair right now, I feel like I'm going to fall asleep.
So you've noticed, Michael, a real correlation between exercise, the activity, as well, and your ability to have a good restful sleep. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And then a couple of other dietary things I've just noticed. And then I used to be a big napper, but now I don't nap after 1 o'clock. Or if I do nap at, let's say 11:30, I'll make sure that my alarm goes off at 1 because I don't want to be sleeping after that. I just decided 1 o'clock is arbitrary time, but it's what I've chosen. The other thing that's hard for me is no sweets after dinner.
Yeah. So good for you. So you've cut down on the sugar after dinner and had early.
Yeah. So
yeah.
A couple of days ago, I had a fruit smoothie for dinner. Just the sugar from the fruit made it hard for me to fall asleep. So cut down on the sugar either during or after dinner. Just in general, through the day, I'm trying to cut down the sugar.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for mentioning that. I'm glad you also mentioned the naps because I know fatigue is huge, a huge issue for our brain tumor community, for survivors. And you found, you still are napping, but you've moved it earlier in the day, and that's made a difference.
Right. The exception is once a week I have a therapy called EEG neurofeedback, and that practitioner highly recommends that I take a nap after that, so that the basically the treatment, her words were, takes hold.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. And will you be able
You are welcome.
Will you be able to stay with
Yes,
us?
I will.
Show? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Great. I'll talk to you more later then. Well, thank you.
Just by phone, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. All right, Dr. Goyal, we have one question here that's been submitted in our Q&A, and I will read that out for all. This has to do with circadian rhythm. Do you have any information or a source of information about circadian rhythm sleep disorders? Does that fall into the category of insomnia?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with these, but I think that they do fall into a different category than insomnia. And I'm happy to, as I'm glad there was a question here so that I could find a reputable source about this, I'll share that. But can share this website from the Cleveland Clinic. But I think that this is a disorder that you would absolutely want to talk about with your medical providers, and even maybe ask for a referral to a sleep specialist so that they can do the proper testing to see if this is an issue that you're dealing with. So I think Michael might have mentioned, or that in order to get that sleep apnea diagnosis, you often have to, kind of maybe do some sleeping at the lab so that they can monitor those things. And so,
right, there's something called a sleep study. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Yeah, no. And so, go ahead, Michael.
It's pretty common. Yeah, I found a sleep specialist through my primary care doctor. I've done it twice. each time they wanted me to go on the CPAP, even though I told them the second time, no. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I didn't,
definitely
they wanted me to come back and do it again. And I said, no, I know you're going to prescribe a CPAP because the CPAP companies have you under their.
Yeah, and so those are the standard sort of testing in order to determine if there are any other types of sleep issues that might be going on that you might not be aware of, but, you know, can get picked up on some of these sleep studies. So, you know, if this is something you're concerned about, I would absolutely talk to your primary care and you know, maybe even see if you need a referral to a specialist about it. Because there are different strategies. So some of the things we talked about today are helpful, absolutely, in terms of the sleep hygiene and trying to maintain a regular kind of sleep schedule and regulating your sleep. But there are some additional types of therapies or things that could be helpful, particularly for this class of kind of disorders.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And
Just add that one other thing that I take. This is Mike.
yeah,
Is melatonin.
Yeah.
I started with a dose of 5 milligrams because that's all that CVS had to sell. I was getting weird, or at least very vivid nightmares and dreams. I don't usually get that. So a friend who's a pharmacist said, no, that's too much. Here's a pill cutter, cut it down to 2.5. So I did. Still sleep okay, but no more trips to Afghanistan or the Olympics.
Yeah, that's a good point
So
about
that's
the right dose of melatonin, because it can have some other side effects. Yeah, thank you. Great.
I have to campaign against Ambien.
Yeah.
Early after my first surgery, I was prescribed Ambien to help promote sleep. I had a very bad experience with Ambien. I was on a business trip in Denver, and I took an Ambien after a party for the people who were attending the conference. I ended up sleepwalking outside of the hotel. Very scary, and never do it again. I'm never going to do it again. I'm not. So
Yeah.
when people ask if I'm allergic to any medications, I add that to it.
Ambien, right. Great. Thank you.
I'm not a doctor. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, all of you. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. Dr. Goyal, Will, Jenna, Michael, I really appreciate your contributing to this discussion. I feel like we have so much information. I want to let you know about our next webinar that we are going to be hosting in a month. It's always going to be on the third Wednesday of each month. And our next webinar is going to be on being your own catalyst, creating change in your life and in neuro-oncology. It's going to be a conversation with Ashley DeBeery and Dr. Suzanne Chang, and hearing again from a wonderful, inspiring survivor, how she's incorporated her own wellness strategies as well as contributed to the whole field of neuro-oncology. So we hope you can join us. I think Mary's going to put the link in if you want to register right away. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll also get a reminder about that. And then finally, for those of you that are able to stay with us for about a half an hour, we are going to have our panelists again with us, and we can continue the discussion. For those of you that are needing to leave us now, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again at a future webinar and hope you have a great sleep.